The bright afternoon sun hung high over the quiet suburban highway as expensive cars rushed past without slowing down. On the shoulder of the road stood a luxury black sports car with a shredded front tire. Its owner, 26-year-old Vivienne Harper, had everything money could buy: designer clothes, a successful family business waiting for her, and a life that looked perfect from the outside. Yet at that very moment, none of her wealth could help her. One by one, cars sped past without stopping, and for the first time in years, she realized how lonely success could feel. She had no idea that the next person to pull over wasn't a millionaire, a businessman, or even roadside assistants. He was a grease-covered mechanic whose kindness would change both of their lives forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in humanity, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind the world kindness still exists. Vivienne had been driving back from a charity planning meeting held in a nearby city. The event had been full of polished speeches about helping struggling communities, yet none of the wealthy guests had noticed the exhausted waitress working double shifts or the elderly janitor quietly cleaning the hall after everyone left. The irony wasn't lost on her, although she rarely admitted it. Her father had built one of the largest construction companies in the state, and since childhood she had been surrounded by people who measured success through expensive watches, private clubs, and luxury homes. She had learned to smile politely while secretly wondering whether genuine people still existed. The loud explosion from the tire had forced her to pull over. She called roadside assistance, but they estimated nearly 2 hours before someone could reach her because of heavy traffic. The afternoon heat became almost unbearable. She tried changing the tire herself, but the lug nuts refused to move despite all her effort. Sweat rolled down her face as passing drivers barely glanced in her direction. About 20 minutes later, an old pickup truck with faded blue paint slowed down. The engine rattled as it came to a stop several yards ahead. A young man climbed out wearing dusty work boots, oil-stained jeans, and a worn gray t-shirt. His hands carried years of hard labor, and his face showed the fatigue of someone who worked long days without complaint. His name was Rowan Mercer. Rowan owned a tiny neighborhood auto repair shop that barely made enough money to survive. Since losing both parents in a tragic accident years earlier, he had raised his younger sister almost entirely on his own. Every dollar mattered. Some weeks he skipped meals just to keep the garage lights on and help pay for his sister's nursing school tuition. He never told anyone about those sacrifices because he believed dignity came from action, not sympathy. Without asking who Vivienne was or what car she drove, Rowan calmly examined the damaged tire. He noticed that one of the bolts had become unusually tight after a previous repair. Using a long breaker bar from his truck, he loosened the stubborn nuts with steady determination before carefully replacing the tire with the spare. Vivienne watched in silence. She expected him to complain about the expensive car or ask for money before helping, but he simply focused on finishing the job correctly. When everything was done, she reached into her designer handbag and offered him several $100 bills. Rowan smiled gently and shook his head. He explained that helping someone stranded wasn't a business transaction. If she wanted to thank him, she could simply drive safely and remember to help someone else whenever she had the chance. Vivienne stood speechless. Nobody had refused money like that before. As Rowan packed his tools back into the pickup, Vivienne noticed how old the vehicle really was. Rust-covered parts of the doors, and one mirror was held together with tape. She also noticed the small lunchbox sitting untouched on the passenger seat. Something told her he hadn't eaten yet. She insisted on at least paying for his time, but Rowan accepted only enough to cover the replacement valve stem he had installed after discovering the original one was damaged. Nothing more. Before leaving, he simply wished her a safe journey and drove away. Vivienne remained standing beside her luxury car long after the pickup disappeared around the corner. For reasons she couldn't explain, she couldn't stop thinking about the mechanic. The following morning curiosity led her to search online for Rowan's garage. The reviews surprised her. Dozens of customers described him as honest, dependable, and someone who often repaired cars for struggling families at little or no cost. Several elderly customers mentioned he refused payment if they were living on fixed incomes. One review simply read, "This man restored my faith in humanity." Vivienne decided to visit. The garage sat in an aging industrial neighborhood surrounded by brick warehouses and small family businesses. The building itself desperately needed repairs. The roof leaked, several tool cabinets were dented, and the waiting area contained only a few old chairs. Yet despite its appearance, customers continued arriving. She quietly watched Rowan work. He treated every customer with equal respect regardless of what they drove. Whether it was a rusty sedan or a brand new SUV, everyone received the same patience and honesty. Later that afternoon, an elderly schoolteacher arrived in tears after learning her transmission had failed. She explained she couldn't afford the repair because her retirement savings had been drained by medical bills. Without hesitation, Rowan offered to rebuild the transmission himself over the weekend and only charge her for the parts. Vivienne couldn't believe what she was seeing. This wasn't generosity performed for attention. Nobody was filming. Nobody important was watching. This was simply who Rowan was. Over the following weeks, Vivienne found herself returning to the garage under different excuses. Sometimes she claimed she heard a strange noise. Other times she requested routine inspections that her nearly new car didn't actually need. Each visit revealed another layer of Rowan's character. She learned that every Friday evening he repaired vehicles belonging to single parents at reduced prices. She discovered he quietly sponsored local high school students interested in automotive careers by teaching them after work. She noticed he always greeted children with warm smiles and allowed them to hold safe tools while explaining how engines worked. Meanwhile, Rowan remained unaware of Vivienne's true identity. To him, she was simply another customer who seemed unusually interested in the garage. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. A powerful storm flooded several nearby streets. Emergency vehicles struggled to reach stranded residents. Rowan immediately closed the garage and used his old pickup to rescue families trapped in rising water. Without hesitation, Vivienne joined him. Together they transported elderly neighbors, carried frightened children through ankle-deep water, and delivered blankets to families forced from their homes. For 12 exhausting hours they barely stopped. As dawn arrived, Rowan collapsed onto the garage floor completely exhausted. Vivienne finally understood something she had been missing her entire life. Real wealth wasn't measured by bank accounts. It was measured by how many lives someone improved. Several days later, Rowan received devastating news. The property owner planned to sell the building where the garage operated. Unless Rowan purchased it within 60 days, he would lose everything he had spent years building. The required amount was impossible. Even after selling every tool he owned, he wouldn't come close. He accepted the news quietly. His greatest concern wasn't himself. It was the customers who depended on affordable repairs and the young apprentices who had found hope inside his tiny garage. Vivienne struggled with what to do. She didn't want to insult Rowan by simply writing a check. She knew his pride wouldn't allow it. Instead, she spent several weeks working with local business leaders and community organizations. She quietly organized a campaign highlighting Rowan's years of service. Former customers began sharing stories online. Teachers described how Rowan repaired school buses during emergencies. Nurses explained how he kept their aging cars running so they could reach hospitals. Parents spoke about the countless times he refused payment when families were struggling. The stories spread rapidly. Television stations covered the growing movement. Local companies donated equipment. Retired mechanics volunteered their labor. Community members contributed whatever they could. Children even emptied their piggy banks. On the final day before the property sale, hundreds of people gathered outside the garage. Rowan walked outside completely confused. Standing near the entrance was Vivienne. For the first time, she revealed that she was the daughter of one of the state's wealthiest business families. Rowan looked stunned. He suddenly understood why expensive cars occasionally arrived at the garage. But what happened next shocked everyone. Instead of announcing that she had purchased the building herself, Vivienne handed Rowan a framed certificate. The property now belonged to a nonprofit community foundation created in Rowan's name. The garage could never again be sold for private profit. It would permanently provide affordable repairs, apprenticeship opportunities, and emergency assistance to families in need. Every contribution had come from ordinary people inspired by Rowan's kindness. No single millionaire had saved the garage. Kindness itself had. Tears filled Rowan's eyes as he looked across the crowd. There were teachers, firefighters, nurses, delivery drivers, retired veterans, single parents, students, and elderly couples. Every face represented someone whose life he had quietly touched without expecting anything in return. In that moment, he realized that every small act of compassion had been planting seeds he never expected to see grow. Months later, the once failing garage had transformed into a thriving community automotive center with modern equipment, free training programs, and scholarship opportunities for disadvantaged young mechanics. Yet Rowan remained exactly the same. He still wore oil-stained shirts. He still greeted every customer personally. He still refused to judge anyone by their appearance or their bank account. Vivienne also changed. She became deeply involved in community service, shifting much of her family's charitable work toward practical local projects instead of glamorous fundraising events. The experience taught her that true generosity wasn't about writing the biggest check. It was about standing beside people, listening to them, and believing in their dignity. If a single flat tire had never happened on that sunny afternoon, two completely different worlds might never have met. One wealthy woman discovered that compassion has no price tag. One humble mechanic discovered that genuine kindness always finds its way back, often through the hearts of people you never expected. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire kindness around the world. Sparkle's special request. Before this story ends, please comment, kindness always comes back, if you believe even the smallest act of compassion can change someone's life forever. As the evening sun cast its golden light across the garage, Rowan watched another customer drive away safely. He smiled, wiped the grease from his hands, and returned to work without expecting praise or recognition. Because the greatest heroes are often ordinary people doing extraordinary things when no one is watching. And sometimes, all it takes to change two lives forever, is a single flat tire.